I've read lots of science fiction stories that have the same theme, and that is that there are aliens presently living on the earth, but they're disguised as human beings, and so we don't know that they're here. And somehow the hero of the story makes this discovery accidentally, and he's in shock and disbelief. He finds out that his school teacher is an alien, the grocer, the mailman, the police officer on the corner, even the mayor. And then he discovers his parents are aliens, which explains a lot, but he is still shocked to his core, and he has to rethink everything that he ever thought was true and that he knew about the world. And the rest of the story is him trying to figure out what the aliens are doing here, and it's usually something very bad for us. And he tries to convince other people that there are aliens and that they need to help him with this, and good luck with that. Anyway, have you ever discovered something that you believed wasn't true? And did it shake you? Did it surprise you or shock you? It might have been something as innocuous as Santa Claus, or it could have been something more serious, like when you first found out that kids cheated in school, or that the streets outside your house were dangerous and people might hurt you, so you had to be careful of strangers. What was it that you learned? And how did you handle the discovery? And do you realize that you are better off now because you know the truth? Well, welcome to video number 5 in this In Favor teaching series called How to Increase Our Faith. And we are trying to expand our capacity and our ability to put our faith and trust in God and in His power in every area of our lives. So you're going to need to stop and download the handout from infavorresources.com. Go to the videos, go to the section where you have a button that says handout, and find the one that says faith, enemies, doubt, because this is a teaching on the enemies of our faith. 3 of them in a row. The first one here is doubt. That's the first hindrance to our faith. And then we'll look at worry, and then we'll look at fear, which are also enemies of our faith. So you're going to need that handout. There's some Greek words on there you need to see, some blanks to fill in, some quotes there. So take the time to do that. And once you have it, you're going to find 4 significant biblical words for doubt. And these appear in familiar passages, important passages. And we're going to look at the ones where they occur. So the first one, looking at your handout, is in Matthew 14. Now the disciples were in a boat, in a storm, and Jesus comes to them walking on the water. And Peter right away says, well, Lord, if that's you, let me come to you on the water. And Jesus says, go ahead. And so for a second there, for a couple minutes, he's doing great. But then, his faith has been strong. His desire to be like Jesus is overwhelming. But then, it says he saw the wind. He was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Now on your handout, verse 31, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, notice that, Jesus said. Why did you doubt? And that word is diastazo. It means to waver, to be of 2 minds about something, to have second thoughts. There's a concept of doubling in this word. On the one hand, you have this. On the other hand, you have that. So Peter's thinking as he's walking across the water, oh, my Lord. And then he thinks, oh, the storm. And he's thinking, my Savior. And then he's thinking, look at the waves. These things are going on in Peter's mind. That's the doubt. Now, for the second word, I've given 2 passages with the same Greek word in them. Matthew 21, Jesus has cursed a fig tree, and it withered away and died. And the disciples said, Lord, how did you do that? And Jesus answers them on your handout, verse 21, truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, notice in all of these passages, faith is contrasted with doubt. If you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but you can also say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and it will be done. Now, the word this time is diakrino. It means to differentiate or distinguish between people or sides in a dispute. It's used for weighing matters, and it often leads to a wavering. This one, no, that one, or a hesitation, especially within a belief system. I believe that, well, now I'm not quite so sure. For instance, in court, the judge has to decide, are they guilty or innocent? Innocent or guilty? Was this crime accidental or intentional? Another appearance of this word is in James 1. I put this in here because we so often quote this passage. It's the same word with the same meaning. Right after James says, if you lack wisdom, ask God and he will give it. Right after that, he says, but when you ask, you must believe, there's faith, and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. So you can see the wavering there. You can see that belief and doubt are battling each other for supremacy in our mind. We saw it with Peter in the water, and we see it here too, kind of that same being tossed here. James says that you're like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed here and there by the wind. Now the third passage is in Luke 24, when Jesus was appearing to people after his resurrection. If you remember, the women find the tomb empty. They run back to the disciples and tell them, but it says the disciples didn't believe them because their words seemed to them like nonsense. But Peter goes to the tomb anyway, and he sees that it's empty. And it says that he went away wondering to himself what had happened. In his mind, he's struggling with doubt. I thought Jesus was dead, but there's no body in the tomb. The two disciples meet Jesus on the Emmaus Road. They run back to Jerusalem to make it even more confusing. They say, we saw Jesus on the road. And while the people are listening to them and talking about this, Jesus crashes the party, which kind of settles it for everybody, or almost everybody. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. And they were startled and frightened, thinking that they saw a ghost. Now this verse is on your handout, verse 38. And he said to them, why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? That word is dialogismos. Now, it describes a thought process, a reasoning that involves a clash of ideas, a dispute, or an argument. They were fighting, they were arguing in that room whether Jesus was alive, and so Jesus appears to them to tell them that he is. It's a turning over of things in one's mind. It's dialogismos. Does that sound familiar? It's the word that we derive our English word dialogue. Dialogismos, dialogue from, which is a speaking and arguing, going back and forth between two people. So do you see the similarities in all three of these passages, all three of these words? All of them have two alternating realities, two conflicting positions, wrestling with each other. There's a wavering back and forth, now one, now the other. You're tossed over here, you're tossed over there. That's what a doubt is. That's what a doubt does. I believe. Well, are you sure? What about this problem? What about this challenge? What about this setback? Well, I think I believe. I'm not sure. I don't really know. Now, I want to stress that doubts can actually be of help to your faith. Let's say that you were taught something, you believe something that isn't true, and someone finally challenges you on that. They say, that's not in the Bible. And you think, well, surely it is. I've believed this since I was a child. And so what it does is it drives you to the scripture, and it drives you to seek godly advice, and it drives you to prayer. And all those are just excellent things, and you were driven there by your doubt. Is that true? Am I believing something wrong? I don't know. So you come out of this with a stronger faith at that point, because you either realize that what you believed has been proven to be true and testified that it's true, or that person was right and you've been wrong all along. But now you're better off because you are believing the truth. So I want you just for a second to move down on your handout. I'm going to come back to that fourth passage, but come down on your handout where it says doubt can begin with, and fill in the blank, doubt can begin with a sincere question. That's all it takes for a doubt to begin, a sincere question. As Henry Drummond put it, doubt is, I just can't believe. There's a problem here. But unbelief is, I just won't believe. I refuse no matter what the evidence. Doubt is looking for light. Unbelief is content with darkness. Loving darkness rather than light, that's what Christ attacked, and he attacked it unsparingly. But when people came to Jesus for answers, when they had doubts or questions and they needed him to resolve their difficulties, like Thomas, who said, well, you said we'll know the way, Jesus, but how? We don't know the way. How can we know it? And Philip, who said, you told us to feed the multitudes. We don't have enough food to do that, Jesus. What are we supposed to do? Jesus didn't scold them. He didn't punish them or mock them or reject them or send them away in disgrace. He respectfully answered their questions to their satisfaction. He helped them deal with their doubts. So, go down there to the place where it says doubt can end on your handout. Doubt can end in, first of all, write in disbelief. Doubt can take you to disbelief. Now let's go back up to that passage, the fourth passage there in John 20. We're going to see that happen here. Jesus has appeared to the group, but Thomas wasn't there when Jesus crashed the party. And he does not believe what the disciples have said. Thomas is thinking to himself, he died. He was put in a tomb. He's been in there for days. And you guys are all saying he's alive. No, Thomas says, I will not believe it unless I see it. You seeing it is not enough for me. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails are and put my hand into his side, I will not believe, he says. So Jesus comes and speaks directly to Thomas. This is beautiful. Jesus says, yes, Thomas. Basically, he says, yes, Thomas, I did die. But as you can see, I am alive. And so he says, put your finger here. See my hands and the wounds that came from the nails. Reach out your hand and put it into my side and the wounds that came from the spear. And then Jesus says, Thomas, stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting and believe. Now the Greek word here is very different because Thomas's case was more extreme. Jesus didn't use one of the popular words for doubt that we see in almost all the other occasions. The Greek word pistos means faithful, believing, trusting. And most of the words for putting our faith and trust in Jesus come from that root. So just like in English, the Greeks had a way of turning a word around just by adding something at the beginning. In English, we have the the colonnuts and the uncolonnuts. Well, if you put un at the beginning of a word, you completely change the word into its opposite. So happy becomes unhappy. Married becomes unmarried. See, it's just the opposite, just by adding that little place at the beginning of the word. Well, Greek has the same thing. It's called the alpha privative. And if you look at your handout there in the John 20 passage, you'll see, even if you look at the Greek word, and if you don't know Greek, you'll see a little letter A. It looks like an English A, and it's an alpha. It's like an A in Greek, and that's the un. If you put an A on the beginning of a word in Greek, you turn the word into its opposite. So pistos, the having faith, believing, trusting, becomes apistos. That's the word that Jesus used with Thomas. And the second phrase, when he said stop doubting, but believe, he uses pistos. But he uses apistos when he says stop doubting. He uses the word for disbelief. Thomas was in unbelief. He wasn't just doubting. He said, no, I don't think it happened. So, the New American Standard shows the contrast in Jesus' statement to Thomas. Be not unbelieving, Thomas, but be believing. Doubt doesn't have to end in unbelief, but way too often it does. And Thomas was in danger of that. So, back down to the bottom of the handout there. And most unfortunately, doubt can also end in disobedience. So you've written in, I hope, doubt can end in disbelief, as with Thomas, and it can end in disobedience, in actual sin because of our doubt. Isn't what the devil did in Genesis 3 when he came to Eve and said, well, did God really say that? And then he said something that God didn't even say, and he reinterprets it in a way that makes it look like God is cheating Eve. Are you sure you're getting everything that you deserve, Eve? Isn't God holding something back? Oh, says Eve, I don't know. I thought I knew God, but now you're telling me that I don't. And oh, I'm not sure. There's the doubt. And we all know what happened after that. So Thanks to Adam and Eve for the mess we're all in now. But there's that wavering, that doubt that Satan inspired in her, that the being tossed to and fro, and the teeter-totter of doubt, faith, doubt, faith. And with Eve and Adam, it didn't end well. With Thomas, it did. Pressing in at the bottom of your handout. If it was F.F. Bosworth who said, believe your beliefs and doubt your doubts. Don't get that backwards. Don't doubt your beliefs and believe your doubts. What are you struggling with right now, this very minute, in your faith? Where is your faith being tested? What problem, what attack, what contradiction, what difficulty are you trying to reconcile? I'd like us to take two encouragements from Thomas. The first one is that his doubts didn't make Jesus write him off, kick him out. He was still a disciple. Jesus still loved him, and he was willing to take special pains. He gave special attention to Thomas to help him deal with his doubts. So that should be encouraging to us. If your faith is being tested right now, Jesus is going to give you special attention. Next, Jesus told Thomas to stop doubting, using the construction for ceasing an activity that's already been in progress. Thomas was already doubting, and Jesus tells him to knock it off. That tells me that we don't have to keep on doubting, that we can stop that process in its tracks, that we can feed our faith and starve our doubts, and we can turn this whole thing around. We can be increasing our faith, which is the whole point of this teaching series. So thanks for staying with me so long on this one. And the next video is going to take the second hindrance to our faith, worry, which also comes from doubt. Hope to see you then.